Hi. So I chose to do this presentation on a book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I chose this book because it has been a great influence in my thinking on leadership and management principles. In fact, Simon Sinek makes a great distinction between leadership and management, in that just because you are in management, that doesn't make you a leader. Additionally, just because you are not in management, that doesn't mean you can't be a leader. So there are some basic concepts that Simon Sinek presents that I want to go over. I want to go over them each briefly, some in more depth than others. But so these are the three main concepts that I will highlight. First is the golden circle, which we'll talk about the why. Second will be the design and function of our different parts of our brains, and why directing communication to the limbic brain portion is important. Third will be the law of diffusion of innovation. So Simon Sinek begins by explaining that in the book about the discovery of these truths began in a journey of sort of a journey of self-discovery. He found himself uninspired by the work he had been doing. By any measure, he was being successful, but he found himself depressed and unwilling to continue doing something that did not make him happy. And he sought out a better way to do it all, and to understand why he had felt that way. In his sort of intellectual analysis of the situation, he made a discovery that this discovery that he made profoundly changed his view on how he thought the world worked, and how it even changed the way in which he operated in it. He says, as it turns out, there's a pattern. All great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all act, think, and communicate the exact same way. It's the complete opposite to everyone else. Sinek doesn't claim to have invented this principle, but he says all he did was codify it. He calls it the world's simplest idea, and he calls it the golden circle. Why, how, and what? Sinek says that this little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire others where others are not able to do so. Here's how he defines these simple terms. He says, every single person and organization on the planet knows what they do. Some people know how they do it, whether they call it their differentiating proposition or proprietary process or USP, but very, very few people and organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, he doesn't mean to make a profit. He says that's a result. By why, he means what's your purpose, what is your cause, what's your belief, why does your organization exist? Sinek makes the point that when most of us communicate, we go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. Usually from the what to the why. But the inspired leaders and organizations that all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. And he gives the example of Apple. He says, Apple is easy to understand because everybody gets it and everybody's well aware of it. He says, if Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them may sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? And we all go, It's not inspiring, right? That's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing and sales are done. And we say what we do, we say how we are different, or how we are better, and we expect some sort of behavior. But this is actually very uninspiring. It doesn't influence behavior. But here is how Apple actually communicates. They say, everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? It's completely different, right? And Sinek makes the point that how different that communication and philosophy is. He says if you're ready to buy a computer from Apple. All he did was reverse the order of the information that he gave you, from the why, how, to the what. So we're all ready to be, and we're all perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But also, it's also why we are perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, an iPod, or an iPhone, or an Apple TV, or fill in the blank here, any other computer product that Apple makes, because they've communicated why. But Apple is just a computer company. There's nothing that makes them structurally different than any of their competitors. Dell, Microsoft tried making MP3 players. Remember those? Nobody bought those. Why? Because people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. There's a reason for all this that Sinek talks about. He points out that if you look at a cross-section of the human brain, the brain is broken into 3 major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. The newest brain, part of our brain, is the neocortex. And the neocortex corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle 2 sections make up our limbic brain. And our limbic brain is responsible for all of our feelings. It's also responsible for all human behavior and decision making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, the how, what, and the why, we are talking directly. People can understand the vast amounts of complicated information like features, benefits, facts, and figures, but it just doesn't drive behavior. But when we communicate from the inside out, the why, what, how, we are talking directly to the part of the brain that controls feelings and decision making and behavior. And then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. We hear it all the time. I know what all the facts and details are, but it just doesn't feel right. That's because the part of the brain that controls the decision making doesn't control language, and that's the best we can come up with. The best we can come up with is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Knowing and understanding these things also determines what people you surround yourself with in your organization. And this is very important when we are doing hiring or promotion or whatever we're doing. If we hire people just because they can do a job for us, if they know how, they will work for our money. But if we hire people who believe what we believe, they will work for us with their blood, sweat, and tears. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And people don't buy into what you do, they buy into why you do it. And if you talk about what you believe, and you will attract those who believe what you believe. At this point we say, well, so what? Why is attracting people who believe what we believe so important? And this is why. Because there is something called the law of diffusion of innovation. The law isn't all that complicated, and we probably already know the terminology. The first 2.5% of our population are the innovators. The next 13.5% of our population are the early adopters. The next 34% are the early majority, the late majority, and these people are the laggards. He says the only reason these laggards don't buy touch-tone telephones now is they can't buy rotary telephones. These people are late to the party at everything. Sinek says that we all sit along at various places at different times on this scale. But what the law of diffusion of innovation tells us is that if we want mass market success or large group acceptance of an idea, we cannot have it until we achieve a tipping point between 15 to 18%. And then the system tips and the majority will adopt it. So there's this little gap that we have to close called closing the chasm. It's the chasm right here. You see, the early majority will not try or accept something until someone else has tried it first. And the innovators and early adopters are comfortable with making the gut decisions that we talked about. That's governed by their neocortex, their limbic core. That we communicate to that limbic core by talking about the why and what we believe. So there's that gap called the chasm that we have to conquer, and that these people that are the people that we want to talk to, these innovators and early adopters, are the people that are comfortable with intuitive decisions that are driven by what they believe about the world, and not just what product is available and what it can do for them and the stats about it. And the organizations and the what and the why. These people, these innovators and early adopters, these are the people who stand in line for the next iPhone when they come out, when they could just walk into the store the next week and buy one off the shelf. And by the way, he says they don't do it for the technology or the product. They do it for themselves. It's because they wanted to be first. People don't buy what you do, they buy what you do. They buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. So, when we're talking about this, the how and the what, that's when what we do has to be entirely consistent with what and how we do it. It has to be entirely consistent with why we're doing it and what we believe. Otherwise, we're not being genuine and people won't trust us. So, that's what we talked about, the golden circle, the why, how, what, and that if we communicate outward, it's more convincing to people in the decision-making process rather than communicating what, how, why. The limbic brain, talking to the limbic core, which controls feelings and the decision-making process. The neocortex is the part that is the rational and analytical thought, but has no capacity for language and is unable to explain why they made the decisions that they did. The law of diffusion of innovation. We're talking about we want to communicate to the innovators and the early adopters, and once we convince these innovators and early adopters by talking to their limbic core, by communicating why, the early and late majority will follow. And Sinek actually makes the case that we don't need to convince everybody. We don't need 100% buy-in. We need to convince enough people to attract people that believe what we believe and buy into why we're doing it, and that by attracting those people that believe what we believe, that will make us successful. Here's just a nice little slide that I found that somebody doodled about all the things that they liked, that all the great leaders in organizations communicate this same way. Whether it's Martin Luther King, whether it's Apple, whether it's the Wright brothers, they've communicated what they believed, why they're doing it, and then how and the what were all consistent with why they were doing it. And it's the world's simplest idea, the golden circle. Not complicated at all. And that as we talk about what we believe, it's we attract those people that we believe, and there are so few organizations and people that understand this. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And then talked about how the limbic core and how it just links directly into how our brain works, and the law of diffusion of innovation. We need to talk to and communicate with those innovators and early adopters, and by doing that, we'll attract people who believe what we believe and we'll be successful. So, thanks a lot for viewing this. I'll send these documents your way, and hopefully that made sense, and I sure enjoyed it. Hope you did too. Talk to you later. Bye.